Okay, so today we learned about long division and how we can divide polynomials. So we're kind of going back to elementary school and learning how to divide. Remember that the denominator is going to go on the outside, so x minus 2, and then we make our division bar just like we would in elementary school, and the numerator goes inside. So x squared plus 5x minus 14, okay? Now, we start with the x on the outside of the x minus 2. So that x times what? You're having to multiply. X times what gives you x squared? And the answer is x. So that goes, notice, in the same column as where the x's are. So x times x, now we're going to multiply this so it's like you're distributing. So x times x is x squared, and we're going to put that underneath the x squared. And then x times negative 2 is negative 2x. We are subtracting just like you do in regular division. And so x squared minus x squared should cancel. And 5 minus negative 2 actually becomes 5 plus 2, which is 7x. And then we bring down the negative 14. Okay? And we do the whole process over again. So now we're trying to figure out the x in the x minus 2 over here on the left. X times what gives us 7x. Now we're working with this 7x right here. Okay? And x times 7, notice we line that up over the constants. X times 7 is 7x, so this becomes a 7x. And then we multiply 7 times negative 2, which is negative 14. Now these two should match because when you're subtracting, 7x minus 7x will cancel. Negative 14 minus negative 14 actually cancels because that becomes plus. And negative 14 plus 14 is 0. So you end up having a 0 remainder. So the answer to your question, the solution, is x plus 7. All right, for the next one, x plus 5 goes on the outside, and x squared minus 2x minus 48 goes on the inside. So you ask yourself, x times what gives you x squared? And the answer is x, so we line that up over the x column. And then we distribute, so x times x is x squared, x times 5 is 5x, and we subtract. So these are going to cancel. Negative 2 minus 5 is negative 7x, and then we bring down the negative 48. We do the process again. X times negative 7 gives us negative 7x, and then negative 7 times 5 is negative 35, and we subtract. So remember, negative negative becomes positive, and so that cancels with the negative 7. Negative 48 minus negative 35, that actually becomes like plus 35, so it ends up becoming a negative 13. Now, when you have a remainder, that negative 13 ends up being put as the numerator, and the denominator was your x plus 5. Okay, so your final answer is x minus 7 minus, because that was negative 13, 13 divided by x plus 5. It's a weird answer, it looks funky, but it's right. Okay, the next one, 2x minus 1 on the outside, 6x squared minus 5x plus 9 on the inside. So we ask ourselves, 2x times what gives me 6x squared? And that would be 3 and an x. Okay, so then we distribute. 3x times 2x is 6x squared, and 3x times negative 1 is negative 3x. And we subtract. These are going to cancel. And you've got negative 5 minus a negative 3, which actually becomes plus. This minus here and this minus here. So that one and that one become a positive, and so negative 5 plus 3 is negative 2x, and then we bring down the 9. And then we ask ourselves, 2x times what gives me negative 2x, and that would be a negative 1. We distribute. So negative 1 times 2x is negative 2x, and negative 1 times negative 1 is a positive 1. And we are subtracting. I like to put it in parentheses so that you remember that you're subtracting even though there's a negative sign over here. So So negative and negative become positive, and so that will cancel out with that. 9 minus 1 becomes 8. So we have an 8 remainder. And remember that it goes over what your original denominator was. So my solution is 3x minus 1 plus, because that's a positive 8, 8 over 2x minus 1. All right, the next one, we have x squared minus 3x plus 4. We are putting that into 5x to the 4th plus 2x to the 3rd. I'm going to put the placeholder for the x squared to remind myself that I have that there, and then minus 9x plus 12. Anytime that it skips a term in the problem, you want to put a 0 there so that you remember that there is that x squared term there. There just are none of them, so we put a 0 in front. Okay, so now x squared times what gives us 5x to the 4th? Well, it would be 5x squared, because if we have x squared and x squared, it becomes x to the 4th, and 5 times 1 is 5. So now we distribute that. So that's 5x to the 4th. Oh, and notice that I put it above the x squared term that I had to insert there because there were none of them. So you want to keep it in the same column and line it up with the other x squareds. Okay, so back to distribution. You have 5x squared times x squared is 5x to the 4th. 5x squared times negative 3x is negative 15x. And 5x squared times 4 is 20x squared. And we are subtracting. So 5 minus 5, these will cancel. 2 minus and negative 15 becomes 17. Okay, negative and negative is positive 15 plus 2 is 17. And 0 minus 20 is negative 20x squared. And then we bring down the minus 9x. Okay, now we ask ourselves, x squared times what gives us 17? Oh, this is x to the 3rd. Oops, sorry, my bad. 17x to the 3rd. So x squared times 17x gives me 17x to the 3rd. And then 17x times negative 3 is negative 51x squared. And 17x times 4 is 68x. And we are subtracting big numbers. You're going to cancel. Negative 20, negative, negative becomes positive 51. So 51 minus 20 is 31x to the 2nd. Negative 9 minus 68 is a negative negative 9 minus 68 is negative 77x. Then we bring down the 12. Okay, so now we're going to ask ourselves, x squared times what gives me 31x squared, and that would be a 31. Okay, so we have to multiply 31 times x squared, which is 31x squared. And then we have to multiply 31 times negative 3x, which is negative 93x. And then we have to multiply 31 times 4, which is 124. And we subtract. So 31 minus 31 cancels. This becomes a positive 93, and then you subtract 77, you get 25. 15. And then 12 minus 124 is negative 112. So that is your remainder. Remainder goes above the other fraction. So this is going to be plus 15x minus 112 divided by x squared minus 3x plus final solution is 5x squared plus 17x plus 31 plus 15x minus 112 divided by x squared minus 3x plus 4. This becomes your final answer. Whew, that was a crazy one.